Well, hello everyone. My name is Paul Biondi. I'm a general partner at Flagship Pioneering and head of our Pioneering Medicines unit, and really thrilled to be here today with my two esteemed guests. I've got Uli Stilz, who's the head of the Bioinnovation Hub at Novo Nordisk, and with Lovisa Afzelius, who is another general partner at Flagship, as well as the co-founder of Metaphore Biotechnologies. And we're here today to talk about actually the relationship that we forged together between Novo Nordisk and Flagship this started back in May of 2022, and we've made a lot of progress since then. The nature of that partnership was really to put together a process where we jointly co-create new medicine concepts that we want to bring to patients in the cardiovascular and metabolic space. And we do that through a way in which we work together to ideate on the Flagship side. Then we propose, hey, here's some interesting platforms that may be able to solve those problems, decide to then prosecute those and bring together in a three-way collaboration between Novo, Flagship, Pioneering Medicines, and platform companies like Metaphor that we can advance really a novel new therapeutic. So we're excited about how this has gone today. We call these partnerships innovation supply chains, and really Novo, through Uli's leadership, as well as Marcus Schindler, who's the head of research and development at Novo, has been really our first pioneers in making this concept work, and it's been a real pleasure to work together. We have 3 programs together now in both the obesity as well as in the MASH space. And today we're going to talk about the collaboration we have with Metaphor and Novo. Metaphor is a very interesting platform that combines computational capabilities with mimicry of proteins to create very interesting novel therapeutics. And we're doing that together in the field of obesity. So I'm going to ask a few questions today to sort of talk about the progress that we've been making and to go from there. So to start out, Uli, I'll direct a question to you. So Novo has really been the innovator in the field of obesity and really tremendous progress in helping patients who are living with that disease. But at the same time, a lot of challenges remain. Not all the unmet need in this disease has been met. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about sort of like where do you see the need for new therapeutics and developments in the field?
Happy to, Paul. But first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here today together with you, Lovisa and Paul, and discuss what we have been doing over the last 6, 7, 8 months since we started this specific project. Now coming to your question, I think there are 2 key elements for me. Obesity impacts so many people around the globe. Millions, about 800 million today, and actually those numbers are growing. So there is a huge medical need to help those people. At the same time, it's a very complex disease, which we still today don't fully understand. So we, I think, only have the first glimpses in terms of understanding the disease biology. And that, I think, leaves us with the need to continue to innovate and build on what we have done the last 10, 15 years, 20 years. In terms of understanding and start to understand incretin biology, and then add to work on continuously improved solutions. Where I think that's for me also critically because of the complexity of the disease and the size of the magnitude of the potential impact, an area where I think partnerships are really important in the cardiometabolic space, where you bring something unique and we add to it, and that we can together develop new solutions. And I do believe where we focus on conceptually thinking about it, that there are 2 key angles. One is about pivoting new modalities or modalities into the space, where then the key question is, how can we actually get to solutions which are both highly efficacious, which can lead to infrequent dosing, and in this way also to convenience and adherence, and which are also very scalable.
Yeah.
Right? Because so many people need to be helped and supported. And the other question is, how can we understand the biology and dive deeper into biology to understand at the end the root cause of this disease? And with the question, can we get to something like a disease modifier?
Yeah.
Can we slow down disease progression? Can we stop it, or can we even prevent it? So those are the 2 dimensions we are focusing on.
Great. And maybe, Lovisa, help us understand better the Metaphor platform and how it can use its kind of programming function to really unlock a broad set of diseases, but in particular in the obesity space.
Absolutely, happy to. And first of all, thank you for having us. It's so good to sit here with the two of you. We've had such a fantastic partnership so far, and excited about the future. So Metaphor, it's really about functional generative design. So it's a machine learning platform, but it's highly biology informed. Because when we talk about, for example, GPCRs and other targets in, for example, obesity, we know that these are very dynamic structures. And the way that the dynamism of them drive what is the downstream function. And this is really the complex biology. And if we look at technologies out there today, they primarily start from static structures, snapshots of reality. But we know that we need to capture that dynamism in order to be able to really design for function. So that's what Metaphor is all about. So what we do, you can call it a three-step process. We map, we mimic, and we design. And in that first stage, when we map, we basically create a very high resolution amino acid level resolution maps of the molecular interfaces that we are looking to model for. And we do that experimentally. So we design thousands of protein variants, and we look for how they actually interact with each other to drive certain functional outcome. What drives better functional outcome for the parameter you're optimizing for? What drives worse? And then we apply machine learning to really condense this massiveness of information that we are gathering into a few key interaction themes, which are what we mimic, the metaphor, basically. Yeah. It's like the mimic of the pharmacophore.
Very clever.
So the metaphor. And these are the few interaction points which we need to fulfill in order to drive that function that we're after. And then we can now be very creative in the sequence, and we can deploy any types of sequence that still fulfill those requirements, but also then simultaneously optimize for other development parameters, whether it's a half-life extension, whether it's thermodynamic stability, any type of drug developability properties. So we optimize for those simultaneously. And what that then leads to is that we can very rapidly generate function-first molecules to design towards very complex biology.
Great. So Uli, when we got into this, what excited you about the Metaphor platform? You talked about the challenges in the obesity space. What got Novo excited about working with Metaphor?
So Metaphor falls into this big question I outlined about, how to actually pivot modalities into the obesity space and create the next solutions. So molecules which are highly efficacious, which are having a long half-life, so infrequent dosing, and by this leading to adherence, and which are also scalable. So, and then we felt, well, there are some receptor systems like the GLP-1 receptor system, where we felt that we want to add more biology to it and design molecules which can do this in one molecular format. And that led us to believe that Metaphor is a unique platform because, like Lovisa was describing it, it's not a platform coming from a structural point of view, which is more static, but it comes from a functional readout. And our view, scientific view, and continues to be that this is actually the way how to look at this problem because these receptors and membrane proteins are highly dynamic. So to get a functional readout, to design molecules which address a number of receptor systems in one molecule in a unique way. So that's why we felt Metaphor is a unique platform. And then we also felt, everything what we want to do is, we want to add something to what you can do. So in this, not only, to give guidance in terms of what is the target we want to achieve, where we believe this is really needed and will help people, but where we also feel like scientifically we can contribute. So in this case, for instance, to help us, help you with assays and to create readouts so that we get to data points. So I think that what we were intrigued by the platform, and we also felt we can contribute, and together we can do something we couldn't do alone. neither we couldn't do it alone, nor you most likely would do it alone. So that's why we got so excited about Metaphor. And I don't, and Lovisa described it so beautifully. There's not much I can add, but maybe one element to add, as I understood the platform. Yes, we design and we start with antibodies because they have a wide design space as a starting point to create then one molecule which can address a number of biologies. But it's a comprehensive design that we can also address pharmacokinetic properties, so that we can actually, in a multidimensional way, change properties, not only optimizing for efficacy, but also optimizing for pharmacokinetic properties and half-life, and so design molecules which are efficacious and infrequently dosed. So that's why we are so excited about the platform.
So let me pick up on the theme you talked about, which is like, hey, all the different parties involved here are kind of coming together to bring their strengths and create the synergies. And whether that's the disease and insights and medical commercial insights that Novo is bringing to bear, the technology obviously that Metaphor has, and the drug development expertise at Pioneering Medicines. How is that playing out as you see the collaboration working, kind of day to day, Lovisa?
I must say it's working really, really well, and I think that is very much also because of the close collaboration that we have really generated between the three different parties. And for a small company, or early company like the Metaphor, we don't have all the expertise as you were alluding to. We are very good at the technology that we're currently developing. But for us to actually focus on developing that platform and continue to expand our technology capabilities while learning from an organization such as Novo Nordisk that has this depth of understanding about the space. Because as we are programmable in our way, having the guidance from Novo and from Uli and many others in his organization, what it is that we need to be focusing on and what we should be thinking about. I think not only does that bring value to the project we have together, but also our organization is learning a lot from these very sort of experienced drug developers, and same thing with Pioneer Medicine. So I think it's a mutual interchange of ideas and mutual interchange of learning from each other, which I think is part of what makes this collaboration so unique. And as it is a platform deal in many ways across Flagship, many of these relationships are, they are established. So you don't have to start establishing novel contacts in the same way. Instead, we've seen each other for quite some time and gotten to know each other, and I think that always helps tremendously with any partnership that you're doing.
I think that's a key point, and I think something that we've really appreciated, I think about the Bioinnovation Hub in particular, because really the way that your team is able to have gotten to know not only Metaphor, right, in an individual setting, but to know Flagship and sort of like how we operate, and also to be that translator back to, the larger R&D organization, back at Novo Nordisk has been tremendous. I mean, I see it through my teams as well and the feedback that we get. But I'm curious, really, how have you all experienced it, and what's your observations around how the partnership enables this to happen?
So of course, there are two themes here, right? There is a specific program with Metaphor, which, I spoke a little bit already about why I think we are so excited, and this close collaboration. And then maybe, Paul, I would add a little bit to complement Lovisa here, the broader framework we created. And what motivated us to say, okay, there are two organizations, Flagship, which has a unique approach to innovation, very experimental. And then with this experimental mindset, trying to go to spaces of science which are unproven and untested, but which could lead to new discoveries of new islands. And Novo, which is very focused to help people living with cardiometabolic. So a very focused organization, which also very strong focus on execution. So two very complementary capabilities coming together. And so at the outset, we felt there is something unique we can create. And then importantly is that we from there developed a joint vision, what we actually want to achieve. So that we actually want to help people living with cardiometabolic conditions by next generation therapeutics. That there was this deep joint conviction, which helped us as we started to build trust in a partnership, also to know there is a North Star which we all actually believe in, that this is what we want to achieve. And then maybe over time, you know, my reflection on this partnership also started to emerge from this joint vision and complementarity to actually what is actually also really important, that we created an ecosystem where very clever people from both sides have a safe space to think together.
Yeah.
And create new ideas. And that's how we came to the metaphor idea. I don't think this idea would have emerged by just Metaphor as a very young company sitting somewhere in Cambridge, and Novo sitting also in Cambridge, but we probably would not even have met.
Right.
And we certainly would not have met on the idea that we want to do something in obesity together. So we created basically an umbrella for brainstorming and ideation of ideas in this partnership, and that has turned out to be really fruitful. Last thought to add, we also created what I'm often speaking to. It's not only science to make this work, but it's also the business side. And to build a framework where we can actually, you know, be creative scientifically, but where we can also be creative on the business side. And create situations where we actually create win-win situations that everyone is incentivized and is motivated to jointly work. And so maybe that are my reflections.
Yeah, and I think that ability to kind of come together and have these kind of iterations and these discussions, right, where we can just say, oh, that's interesting, and that's what you're trying to do. We really think, like a platform like Metaphor in the early discussions, right, and it was great to be able to pull Lovisa and say, what do you think of this? Because to your point, you know, particularly in the cardiovascular and metabolic space, that's not typically where one of our companies would start to tackle, right, because there's such a large commitment that needs to be made, you know, downstream in the development space. It's kind of daunting for a small company to contemplate, but knowing that you're like, you know, that you all are like, hey, we will help you in that journey, right, and we'll be there to be your partner, I think has gone a long way and has been very successful. Sure. Yeah. So, you know, we do have this kind of shared vision, which you described, Uli. You know, what are you looking forward in the partnership? We just have, as you said, it's only been 6 to 8 months now. So what are you both looking forward to as the partnership progresses?
Great molecules, right? It's
so, yes, of course. Now we have started. You know, we have a really exciting idea what we want to achieve. Now it's to actually create the outcomes we aim for. So molecules with the profile we are looking for, 1, 2, and then drive them towards the clinic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's we've started the work. We are progressing really nicely, I would say, together, and it is exciting next couple of months to come with a lot of new data, with a lot of new insights, and with a lot of progress.
Yeah, no, it'll be terrific, right? It'll terrific to start to see, like, okay, here's our initial output, right, and some of the data associated with that to say, hey, this is truly feasible and, you know, exciting and what we can really do in a way that's never, as you said, never been done before, right, to combine these in a singular entity like that. So.
And I think, Paul, there's maybe a broader observation. You mentioned that we now have 3 programs started over the last 12 months. It's actually really nice to see that all 3 are progressing and tracking towards outcomes and milestones. So that we actually have now moved from a joint vision, what we want to achieve, to something where it becomes tangible, where, you know, outcomes and milestone achievements start to happen. And that, of course, is critically important, because at the end of the day, we want to develop transformative new medicines and bring them to people living with cardiometabolic disease. But it's nice to see that the framework is actually working and starts to create outcomes. Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, I look at it very similarly. Like, I look at the progress we're making, not only in Metaphor, which is going great, but in the other 2 with Celerity and with Omega. And the fact that, to me, it's almost like the thesis that we had, right? If we bring these 3 players together, right, between Pioneering Medicines, Novo Nordisk, and the platform companies, that will lead to, you know, a higher degree of success. And I think we're already seeing it, like where we've run into either technical challenges or business challenges, you know, along the way, then an ability to pretty rapidly kind of solve those problems, right? Because there's a high degree of trust. I think, you know, as you said, a very good shared vision of what we're trying to accomplish. And rather than that derail very early on, and maybe some of these, you know, relationships, an ability to kind of very quickly say, okay, how do we overcome those issues? You know, we saw it a bit even in setting up the relationship with Metaphor specifically, but also seeing it and I think the fact that all three are continuing to progress, and I mean, there's always technical challenges that we may run into, but it's exciting to see that at least as a partnership, it's allowing us that the relationship is not the challenge, right? It's, if anything, it's an accelerator.
And it actually allows us to move really, really quickly. And I think we actually, after we actually had aligned on what it is that we really want to do, we moved very quickly, and we continue to move very, very quickly, which I think is just what the uniqueness of the relationship and what you're really looking for, both as a small company and a large company. So it's, in that sense, very much a win-win.
So maybe to wrap up, I'm going to go a little bit broader. I think one of the things that's exciting about Metaphor is its application of